Thank you. Thank you for this hearing. Let me circle back to the Community Reinvestment Act. This is something that I've been concerned about, Mr. Otting, I know this is something that you're dealing with right now. I have been trying to ensure that we have protections in place and they stay robustly in place to prevent redlining, to ensure that our financial institutions are providing credit in low-income, moderate-income communities, right? And it is the role of the OCC to ensure that that occurs, correct?
Yes, it is, ma'am.
Okay. And so I know, and we've heard statistics, our nation has the largest gap between white homeownership and African-American homeownership since we began recording it. Whites more than 73% and African-Americans slightly above 41%. You're in the process of reforming the CRA, but wouldn't you agree that any changes you make to the CRA should not make that gap worse?
I agree with that.
And to make those changes, you just said it earlier, you are receiving comment, public comment, to help as you maneuver through this to ensure that that gap does not get worse, and you're taking those public comment into consideration, correct?
That is correct.
And some of that public comment you may not agree with, but you're going to take all of it into consideration.
Most of it I do.
Right, but that's the nature of it. You get public comment, some of you agree with, some of you don't, but you try to do the right thing here and ensure that you're enforcing the law and protecting against redlining. Isn't that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so what I don't understand then is why when you receive public comment, and this is the first time I've ever seen a regulatory body do this, you're trying to silence some of that public comment. You sent a letter to a California Reinvestment Coalition trying to quiet them. You did a op-ed under Barry Wides, Deputy Controller of Community Affairs, talking about how some of the public comment you received you felt was not constructive, and you were scolding them. I'm not quite sure what purpose that serves and why and how that benefits.
Because we felt the facts should be accurately reflected, and that particular organization was dispelling false information.
Okay, and so I don't understand what the false information is. If they have
happy to come by and share that with you.
Well, let me just say this: if they have concerns and they're a community organization, well, let me approach it this way. Let me approach it this way, because I've only got about 5 minutes, so I appreciate you, and you can come in and talk to me about it. Let me approach it this way. To ensure that these financial institutions are complying with the CRA, don't you need to get out input from the community and public comment to ensure they're complying?
That's why we met with 1,000 separate organizations, got 1,500 comments. When we complete the NPR, we'll put it back out for 75 days for additional comment.
No, even when you're not doing the public comment, once the CRA is in place, don't you need community comment? In fact,
we
isn't
have
it true?
16
Let me just ask
people
you
around the
this.
United States that does outreach on a consistent basis.
Perfect. And isn't it true that a bank wants federal regulatory approval for a deal like a merger, and when that goes through and a community, regulators consider the bank's compliance with the CRA at that moment in time and the bank's promises for future compliance measures? So when that happens and mergers occur, you're going out into that community and getting community input. Isn't that true?
There is an open comment period where people are able to offer those comments.
Right, and it provides a basis for community groups to come in and say whether or not they think those financial institutions have complied within their community with the CRA. Isn't that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so I guess why I'm confused is why then is the OCC instructing examiners to investigate some of the claims separately rather than addressing them within the merger approval process?
So I think there's confusion on this topic, and it may be originating by the same group who we wrote the letter about, is that what we've done is we've taken the issues and we've provided them to the examiners. That is generally done parallel with the licensing process to allow them to be able to evaluate the validity of any claims, whether they're fair lending or they're...
So what does it matter whether it's an individual community or a community group? Why are you trying to limit the community groups' ability to provide that information?
That's an inaccurate statement that we're doing any limiting.
Okay, so can I ask you this? There's a statement that has been made that's been attributed to you, and it quotes this: I went through this is you saying this, I went through a very difficult period with some community groups that didn't support our community when you were with One West, when you were trying to merge with CIT Bank merger. And you claim they didn't support our community, who came, and these community groups came in at the bottom of the ninth inning that tried to change the direction of our merger. And so I have a very strong viewpoint. You've also stated that part of your modernization plan is to prevent community groups from pole vaulting in and holding bankers hostage. And so that's why you're trying to prevent these community groups from being able to provide under the CRE their input.
No,
Is that true? Are those comments true?
That's not true. Those comments are accurate. However, what
Wait a
I
minute,
was
the comments
referen-
are accurate?
Those comments are accurate. They reflect what I said. And what the reason was is because we had overwhelming support in our community for the merger, and groups came from outside the community that had no input, no data, weren't familiar with our organization, and tried to stop the merger. And so they have an open voice. I will never try to quiver their voice. I just want it to be an accurate process.
So you're telling me right now that the comments that were made that you just talked about, individuals from outside the community came in.
correct.
So the California Reinvestment Coalition and anybody in California,
They were not.
they
in
were
our
not within that
geographic-
community.
They were not. They're a Northern California-based organization, and we were a Southern California-based bank.
Okay. I noticed my time is up. I will submit the rest of my questions for the record. Thank you.